In a world overrun with horror podcasts, where beauty and terror blend together with goopy results, where the cinematic creations from one's own imagination can kill, where hangnails and sledgehammers duke it out for the ultimate nightmare. Two horror authors must come together and overcome their differences in hopes of surviving the most terrifying interview of their life. Fearmongers. And I'm Clay Chapman, Clay McLeod Chapman, your host for the night. And oh my golly, Buckaroos, do we have a fun one for you? I'm so excited. We have the author of Camp Damascus, Bury Your Gaze, none other than Chuck Tingle. Hello, Chuck. How are you doing?
Hello, I am so glad to be here. I am thrilled.
Hallelujah.
It's gonna be a fun night. What an
Oh,
intro! You need to be hired to do film trailers, I
oh
think.
my God, please hire me to do something, anything. I need the work. The author of none other than the gooiest, goopiest debut. It's the debut. This is it. This is where it begins. Holy shit. Where do we go from here? That none other than the debut novel, Youthjuice. It is E.K. Sathue. E.K., how you doing?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
Oh my God. You guys are the best. Thank you so much for joining me. I have been really, really looking forward to this. I have to say, the kismet of the two of you is that I feel as if both of your books, Bury Your Gaze and Youthjuice, they make a wonderful pairing. And I feel like they're one of the reasons behind that is because there is a certain kind of, I don't want to say like takedown, but there's a certain kind of like peering behind the curtain of certain industries that we hold particularly near and dear to our hearts. And I think I'm thinking specifically of the wellness beauty industry and and Hollywood. And I don't know, like I guess like kind of straight out of the gates, I want to ask both of you, and EK, I want to start with you. What what is our fascination? What readers' fascinations, audience members' fascinations with like getting a chance to kind of look behind the curtain to see what's in the sauce?
I think it's so fun. And I think with industries that are particularly glamorous, it's just like you want the underbelly. You're like, what? There's got to be something sinister underneath, I think, is the assumption. And I think is often true a little bit.
Okay, okay. Well, then you said it, and I'm gonna get all of my information wrong. I saw you at an event, and I found it kind of profoundly upsetting and very enlightening because not only did you read from the book, but you also were kind of talking about a previous life, and I want to know, you have some journalistic like background within uh the wellness culture. And I wonder if you could kind of speak specifically to that.
Yeah, I think so. I sort of fell into, I was a beauty editor at a few different publications in my 20s, kind of like my first jobs out of school. And I sort of fell into it because I always wanted to be a writer and like I just didn't really know what that meant. Like I wanted to write novels, but I didn't know how to make myself write a novel. So I applied for a bunch of internships in kind of like these fashion and beauty blog spaces, which slowly turned more and more into writing about beauty. And I'd always been like fascinated by Vogue and, glamorous publications growing up. So I kind of always thought, oh, maybe I'll work in that world. But then kind of as soon as I started working in it, I just felt so out of place. I felt so strange all the time. And I didn't like really ever think, oh, I'm definitely going to write a novel about this. But after I had sort of been transitioning away from that kind of work, I just I couldn't stop thinking about how strange it was, and sort of the feeling of just being like a fish out of water at like a beauty launch party where people are spending, companies are spending tons of money to celebrate like a shampoo. And you kind of have this feeling sometimes of like the world is on fire. And it's not like we can't have fun at the same time that we're like, that things are bad in the news, but something just felt particularly strange to me about this like worship of products and this
Yeah.
worship of like the one little jar or thing, bottle that's gonna change your life.
Yeah. I mean, when you say you were a beauty editor, we're talking about like, are you like you're receiving the works? You're like writers are kind of coming to you, they're submitting, and you're kind of combing through, fact checking, like getting it all kind of ready to press send. But you're engaging, like you are going to these events, you are getting the free swag. Um,
Yes.
are you at this point in your 20s also saying to yourself, uh, there's a book here, there's a story here. I'm just going to bank all of this until the manuscript is ready to come out?
I think I always like did kind of know somewhere. Like I was always just paying so much attention to the details. And then when I actually started working on the book, I was like surprised at how quickly and how much things came back to me because I'm not like a journaler. Like I never journal. I never had anything written down from this period. And it was sort of like I was doing that and then freelancing, but also still in that space. And then the pandemic kind of started. So I was still sort of working online, doing this like, I'm still kind of in media for my like day job, but it's separate from the beauty industry. And I was still sort of doing it, but then we were like locked in our homes and I was staring at my face a lot. And I think there was like a feeling, I think I was like 28 at the beginning of the pandemic somehow, if that makes sense. I'm like 33 now.
It's a whole, that's a,
Must
we,
have,
yeah, that was 35 years ago at
yeah.
this
So
point. Yeah.
I was like, I think there was a feeling of like my youth is slipping away a little bit. Like now that we're kind of like back in the world, I don't feel like I really like lost that much time, but I definitely spent a lot of time being like, I'm trapped inside, but I'm still young and my face is changing. And I think I was almost, when I started writing this, it was like I was making fun of myself a little bit for how melodramatic I felt about getting older when I was still like really young.
Mhm. Well, Chuck has a solution to that, and that is that in Hollywood, uh, all of us are just going to be kind of uploaded to the the whatever the cloud. There will be a,
The corporate data center.
and they're just going to bank us. And Chuck, I have to ask, with Bury Your Gaze, I mean, I know that it's kind of posited as this kind of satirical horror, but I'm reading it and it does feel like just kind of like looking out the window. And I feel like I kind of want to ask you the same question of, with this novel, our fascination with Hollywood and the kind of like inner machinations of like how the industry works. Um, is this something that you yourself have kind of like, are you a cog in this wheel? Like, are you a part of this cinematic machine?
It's entirely now we've dove right down to it. The question of who lies behind the mask. Could it be someone who happened to star in Hell or High Water, Star Trek, and The Princess Diaries too? Who knows? I will say that so for the motivation, which was kind of the initial talk of like, what is driving this? Why focus on this industry? I find, and we're all writers here, when you have a villain, whether it's a horror monster or anything else, particularly in horror, there's a couple of motivations that really happen a lot. I mean, you have like survival, if it's a more kind of animalistic creature, it just wants to eat or something like that. You have revenge, or a lot of the times just to sort of unexplained sort of insanity. You know, you think about your Michael Myers or anything like that. Um, I am fascinated by not repeating motivations, or at least finding motivations that are unique. And I find capitalism to be a very underused motivation in a genre that is really inherently kind of political, and kind of has a message. People don't think of horror like this, but really so much social messaging happens in horror. So really, I was fascinated by the motivation of capitalism, and it also kind of just fell into a story that I wanted to tell that was very personal. To kind of edge towards your question, I will say definitely the most personal book that I have ever written.
Yeah.
And it is essentially my story. I think that I have, I have never, I have been a creator in some form throughout my lifetime, and I have said publicly, behind this mask, there are a few buckaroos that might say, "Whoa, that's Chuck." So I am familiar with industries that involve cogs. I can tell you that much.
It's a big wheel. It's a big wheel. But
Yes.
it's funny because like it is amazing how, you've got what, the Black Lamb, you've got the Bride, Miss Y. Miss Y for me is honestly like that is the kind of creation that kind of comes out of Bury Your Gaze that has continued to follow me
Oh,
well
thank you.
after.
Yes, I did a Tumblr poll and said, "What's your favorite monster?" I was very curious because I feel like you can almost tell, you can tell something about someone for what their favorite monster is. And I thought it would be, a lot, most of them are even, but Mrs. Y particularly just had a huge, I think that's the favorite
Yeah.
actually. And that's another example of finding a creative motivation for your villain and not just making them a sort of stock motivation, I think, because her motivation is what makes her interesting.
Yeah. But it's what I love about the book is that, I mean, by the end, you do kind of say like the real villain here is what, unchecked capitalism, and like that idea of just kind of the very kind of like notion of intellectual property, like that, I we're all kind of like orbiting this world within the publishing industry where, like, if we're lucky, I think that like we assume if we're lucky, there will be this moment where there will be that meeting with our agents who will say like, oh, well, this production company wants to, they want to option your book, and that there's this kind of like I almost think of it as kind of like an evolutionary kind of continuation or an extension of the things that we create. That like there is the book, like we have this kind of initial step within the process, and like the book exists, and it is what it is. But then there's this furthering of it, and
Yes, then the timeline grabs onto it and transforms it into something else that we don't really have control over. And I will say I have come to terms with that. I actually love that about art. That's why I love fan fiction, and I do truly believe that art exists beyond the last page. It is your experience after the book, before it, what you ate for breakfast that morning. It is a collaborative multimedia experience that goes far beyond a film or a book or a song. It's our life around it. Nothing exists in a vacuum. So I
yeah,
do appreciate that. But I do think that there is also a fear in all artists of kind of that knowledge. And then we all have to kind of reckon with the idea that our art, our child, is not really ours. It
yeah.
is kind of just the world's.
Well, that's the thing. Like, it's like it gets down to this question of like who owns it, like who owns your story, and or who owns your likeness, or who owns like just I recently saw the kind of most recent installment of a certain kind of franchise of, extraterrestrial, Romuluses, and, there's a certain character that has kind of been brought back to life, even though the actor himself no
Oh
longer is
yes,
alive.
I
And
did
it's,
just see that, and I thought, that's Bury Your Gaze right there. My book is coming to life.
well, that's my question then. Like, like, you start this process of writing this book, I have to imagine a year ago, 2 years ago, like the ball gets rolling, and you're talking about AI, you're talking about like, capturing likenesses in order to kind of like bank them and use them kind of 30, 40 years, down the road. Like, when does sci-fi become science
Oh,
fact? Like
that is
when,
such a good question because I wrote this at about the same time as Camp Damascus. So it's been, over 2 years. And when I wrote it, I thought to myself, wow, I love this idea. I've had it for a while. But in the editing, I'm gonna have to smooth this out because no one's gonna believe it. No one's gonna think that this would ever be possible or even make sense. I thought it was way too much of a leap to
yeah,
just kind of jump into all this stuff. And then the writer's strike happened, and then kind of AI, generative AI started kind of proliferating. And I just looked at this book that I wrote a couple of years back, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is gone from something that no one will understand to something that everyone's talking about. It was a very sort of the memes of the Simpsons doing predicting the future. I felt like I had triggered some kind of monkey's paw almost, and it was the worst version
you
of this terrible wish.
close the portal, Chuck,
Yes.
close it. You open the gates. So I guess the question in eternal life is that we just have to upload ourselves, or our likenesses, or take a little foundation, little special something something, kind of rub it on the cheeks, rub it on the hands, and voila, we are beautiful and youthful again. Um, EK, I, I have to. I've been kind of curious. I want you to say the name of your novel three different ways. Is it possible to like? Because I feel like there's the way that you say it, and there may be the way that I say it, and they might not be the same way. But I just want to hear you say the title three times fast and see if it sinks in.
Okay, this is really funny actually because youth juice, youth juice, youth juice.
Oh no, is this like Beetlejuice? Is it going
Well,
to
that's what I was gonna
suddenly appear?
say. So the title kind of like I wrote like a full draft of this and I had no name for the product or anything, no title. And then I'm like sitting there, my agent and I are like, we were gonna submit this book. What's the title? And I'm like kind of sitting there naming things, thinking about funny product names that I've like encountered. And I thought of Beetlejuice, and then I was like, Youth Juice. So it like literally was kind of inspired by
Oh
that. That's why
wow.
I think it's funny that you asked me to do that.
I just love like I'm gonna admit to this. I'm copying to this on air, and it's like I have said I have been like walking through my house, and I'll just be like youth juice, youth juice, youth juice, and like I'll just keep doing it, and my family will just be like, what, huh? And I'm just like, no, 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 I'm in my head. But much the same way with Bury Your Gaze, EK, I feel as if there's a certain uh there's a certain kind of value to youth juice and the like that skews to satire, but I don't know. I feel as if the product lines and the kind of the conversations that you're having in the book, like I open up the kind of the Thursday style section in the Times, and it's like, oh, well, we're rubbing, you know, seal placentas on our cheeks, and it's just like, well, this feels oddly horrifying. And then so I go back to Youth Juice, and it's like this feels like I could be reading, like this feels actual. And I guess like my question is, what is the line? Like where did you say, oh, this is going like now I'm encroaching into like the fiction of it versus like, well, actually, this is, people do rub blood all over themselves.
Yeah, which they do. That is inspired by several real treatments. There are like plasma facials, plasma moisturizers. It's also inspired by the fact that like, does any of this stuff really work? Do we know? Like, I liked that element because, like, I'm sure maybe a certain type of reader would be like, rubbing like blood on your face, like, it's not gonna actually make you like young forever. And I'm like, yeah, probably not. But
We're
we
gonna
don't,
keep trying. Just
but
keep
we're gonna keep
trying.
trying. I mean, I guess I don't know if this is like spoilery, but I feel like the murder elements in the book are maybe where I feel like it tips into heavier satire, but I think that that's also kind of like a very direct commentary on how capitalism is actually harmful and actually causing literal damage
Yeah.
to the planet and people. So is it? I don't know.
I mean, this is the thing. Like both of your books like skew heavily into horror, and yet there is this vibe of like I could buy it. I could believe that there is someone bathing. I mean, I know that Elizabeth Bathory gets kind of tossed out there as a iconic kind of like the original, the OG Gooper. And I don't know. Like I just feel like it, this has been around for a while. while. Um, EK, I I do want to ask you, and I'm putting a little weight on your shoulders, forgive me, but like, could you give us the pitch for Youth Juice? Could you, for those of us who are the uninitiated, like, can you kind of tell us what Youth Juice is about?
Yeah, so Youthjuice is about a young woman named Sophia who's about to turn 30. So she's 29, that age that I was when I started writing this. And she's kind of like aimless. She's never really had, I guess, like a fancy job. She's always just kind of like worked at, she's been like a barista. She lives with her rich roommate, so she doesn't have to pay like super expensive rent, but she needs to work, and she gets a job at Hebe, which is this like very trendy beauty and wellness company based in Soho, New York City. It's named after the Greek goddess of youth. And it's run by this woman named Tree Whitestone, who's just like this very enigmatic kind of influencer, but very strange. And she just gets very instantly pulled into this world. And Tree gives her this moisturizer that they're testing called Youthjuice, and she asks her to try it out, little like, R&D research. And Sophia has a really bad nail biting habit, which I think is putting it a little lightly. So that's kind of where the body horror element comes in. And this cream
Mhm.
actually cures her, not only the scarring and like tissue that's kind of on her hands, but also her urge to like actually bite her nails. So she's kind of like, what's in this stuff?
Yeah.
And it goes from there. Gets weird.
Um, I I feel as if we're having a fun kind of moment. And I'm going to posit a theory, and then I want you to shoot it down if you feel like this is incorrect. But I feel like lately there has been a kind of interesting trend of is this, I don't know if this is too crass. Like really shoot me if this is wrong, inappropriate, but like the daughters of Patrick Bateman. The like like I feel like I think of books like Mayfly by C.J. Lead. Recently, there was The Eyes Are the Best Part by Monica Kim. Rachel Harrison with Black Sheep. There's certain books that take this idea of the kind of, I don't want to, what is the word? Like I'm kind of getting tongue tied already, but like that taking the kind of like the spirit, the essence of Bateman and kind of, you know, putting it in a structure that is so not American Psycho. Like, and is this like, do you kind of roll your eyes at me now? Like, have I kind of like shot myself in the foot? Like, do you agree? Like, do you feel like Youth Juice? I mean, Youth Juice is even kind of isn't it pitched as American Psycho meets Devil Wears Prada?
Yes. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I think you're totally correct. And it was, in a lot of ways, it was really intentional, like on my part. Like, I think, there's definitely a pastiche in Youthjuice. There's a lot
Yeah.
of like food and outfits. I didn't want to go, the voice is super different.
Yeah.
But I love American Psycho, and I didn't actually reread it early on in the process of writing this, but I did reread it like later on when I was just trying to really hone that mix of like banal kind of social behavior mixed with brutality, because I think that book does it so well. And I think that like for me when I was working on this, like there's that scene of Patrick Bateman just doing his skincare routine and narrating it at the beginning of, well, the movie. It's like very viral.
Mhm.
And it's like literally, I mean, now there are people just doing this on YouTube. Like that's like what a get ready with me video is, Like Patrick Bateman kind of was like the original skincare influencer.
So is this like the next generation then? Like, are we all the children of Bateman? Like, is this like
Yeah. Is
people will
that
be youth juicing in like 5, 10 years? Like, this is going to be the more we change, the more we stay the same.
exactly?
um, but I do think that, you know, what Youth Juice does, and it takes this notion of body horror and kind of blending it with beauty. And I felt like this was really fresh and just so cringe inducing. Like there's a certain kind of moment where like, I mean, I feel like there's a seduction with this book that I really, like straight off with like the cover, it's just there's something so appealing to it. Youth just it like everything is just kind of like easing you in. And but there's a trap to it. And I feel like once you're caught, you start peeling skin away. And I I just want to know like how close is beauty and body horror in your mind? Like what are the parallels, and like how does like because for me they're like on their surface they're so starkly contrasted, and yet you've kind of blended them together so effortlessly, beautifully, that I want to know how did you do this?
Yeah, I think to me there's such a fine line because like there's so many skin treatments and stuff that are like gross or painful. Like people love Dr. Pimple Popper, which is just like these videos where you can see like extreme like zit popping and extractions of blackheads online, which is so gross. I can't even really watch them,
Yeah.
but they're very unsettling and like even just sort of like on a day-to-day using skincare level, like I, put a bunch of stuff on my face every day. And sometimes you just get like stinging, like red rashes, and you're like, I don't really know. Like, then you're like, I have to stop. Maybe I'm not using the right thing. Sometimes it's literally products that you use all the time and they just suddenly start feeling weird. And like, I do remember this one time when I was kind of early on trying skincare stuff and like, was like 24, so I didn't really need to like do anything to my face. And I have pretty like delicate skin to begin with. And I was like, had heard, oh, it's like good to use coconut oil to like wash your face. So I did that, but then they had these like brushes that would vibrate and like it was a cleansing brush.
Yeah.
And even though I had rinsed my face, like there's still like a film of coconut oil. So I basically just like used that and sunk the coconut oil into my pores, and I woke up with like the worst hives of my life just all over my face.
Yeah.
And I still think all the time, but it was like gross and fascinating. Like I couldn't stop like looking at the hives in the mirror, which is like maybe a gross thing to admit, but like I still have a couple photos of it and I just like can't delete them because I'm just like, ew, my face is like, it looks like I have like boils, like I got like something happened. I mean, something did happen, but it looks like something bad happened to me.
It is Cronenberg on aisle 3. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Um, Chuck, it's interesting because when I read Bury Your Gaze, I I walked away from it feeling very uplifted. And, Misha, the protagonist, kind of goes through a pretty harsh, intense journey. And I guess maybe before we get into that, I need to ask you the same question of like, can you give the kind of the tell us the story, the pitch of Bury Your Gaze for the uninitiated?
Yes, Bury Your Gaze is the story of a screenwriter named Misha who is asked to kill off or well, given an option to either kill off the queer lesbian leads of his television series in the season finale, um, or to have them come out and then immediately die, which is the Bury Your Gaze trope. This is suggested by the vice president of television at his studio. And it is suggested because they have an algorithm that can kind of tell you what will bring more viewers and therefore more money to their programming. And that's what it says is going to yield the best results. Misha says no, and then promptly begins to be stalked by various creations throughout his career, all kinds of monsters. And at first, the motivation is he's not exactly sure. And as time goes on, it unravels and begins to unravel all kinds of things in the film industry.
Mm.
So that is the basic idea.
I mean, it's so what I find so amazing about it is that in any lesser character, like Misha's posed this question of like, can you kill off these characters? Can you kill your queer characters? And any lesser writer in this position would probably, like, even if they disagreed with the note, like how many times has there been the studio note where it's like, you know what, let's I think this character should die off, or let's change that, and like can it be a dog instead of a kid? And like, like inside you're just like, oh my God, they're destroying my story within this Hollywood cog, this Hollywood wheel. But like on the outside, we agree. We say, yeah, sure, of course, we'll totally do that. Like, yeah, I see that. And you take the note, and the the script, the movie, the project, whatever it is, it evolves into something perhaps lesser than what it originally could have been. And I think that what Misha says is, no, I will not compromise. I will not, uh, you know, uh, kill off these characters. And that's when, you know,
That's when all hell breaks loose.
all
I,
hell.
I will say, it is interesting because uh, I almost see that as a you are complimenting the character. I feel like that is a unexpected compliment to myself because I would absolutely do that, and I do that. Interestingly, it's hard for me to imagine saying yes to notes in that way. I personally do not implement any notes that I do not agree with, and so yeah, it is interesting to think, what a horrible position to be put in with something that you care so much about, to feel that pressure. But I think that's a pressure that creators feel. I think it's a pressure also, particularly that like um creators in sort of like outsider groups, marginalized groups feel. I mean, to connect this to your previous question about sort of the daughters of Patrick Bateman, you said, I actually think, it goes kind of beyond that, of just that there's a sort of a floodgates opening of horror, not just for like women writers, but for queer writers, for me, like neurodivergent writers, outsider artists, and what that's creating is this sort of landscape where not only are kind of outsider buckaroos getting the opportunity to tell their stories, they're getting the opportunity to tell their stories in a way that I think was previously, whether we know it or not, kind of reserved. Like there was a lot of things, and I can't speak for women writers, but I can say for like a queer writer, like okay, I got my foot in the door. I better really write, I better behave in the way that I write this story. Patrick Bateman, if we talk about American Psycho, really, you can talk about all of Bret Easton Ellis. All his characters are disaffected. You have American Psycho, you have Less Than Zero, Glamorama. All of these, there is a tone to that I think is a sort of a punk rock tone, an untraditional tone, that now I just think we're seeing more of that sort of saying no to the note of you have to write it by committee from marginalized creators. And I think that's creating this feeling right now of these really, really interesting stories and perspectives.
And are there platforms that still that are kind of maintaining the, like, cracking the floodgates open? Like, I always kind of worry about like a certain kind of tension point of like they crack open a little bit and there's a little pressure to close it back up, but no, it opens up a little bit more. Like, do you find that the pressure is pushing outwards as opposed to sealing back up again?
I think it's both. I think all of these journeys are they move upward in not just in a constant lift, but in an up and down sort of snaking motion. I think that it takes artists really just speaking their truth, not being afraid to write these stories. So that's why I think that's why it's so exciting, is there is that sort of risk going on where you're thinking, wow, I can actually crack open some of these new books, this new kind of era of writers that's happening right now, and think, wow, I might actually read something new. I might read something I haven't read before, just because there's voices coming to it who wouldn't know to write it any other way. For myself, I don't come from, everyone's trying to guess behind the mask. And lately on this book tour, because I'm trying to kind of eliminate, I need to keep my privacy, but I'm trying to tear down as many walls as I can throughout the course of my career. And that makes me feel safe and all that, but still kind of removing some of that metaphor. And I have been talking about how I am not, everyone has their guess, but I am not a writer until now. Like, I am a writer now, but it's not like you're going to take this off and see James Patterson under there. Surprise! Not James Patterson. Cross that one off your list of Buckaroos. But my profession previously may have been a creative field or simultaneously, but definitely not writing. So I'm coming to this just from a complete outsider. And so some of these things that I think more traditionally trained writers, I think some are just I don't even think of them. I don't because I just don't, it's not even in my brain. And I just think you get a lot of that with outsider art and with marginalized art, actually. So you're going to have these really exciting new stories.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's correct, because I think all of those writers who have been in this, been in the writing rooms or been kind of in the pitch sessions, like they end up taking the note. They end up killing the characters. And I feel like that kind of perpetuates a process of just safe pap. Like it's just
Yes.
like, let's keep on the wheel. Let's keep it going. But
Well, a
like,
lot of the time they have to for their job, right? For their
yeah.
livelihood. And I think that's what's exciting I hate, as a real punk rock buckaroo myself, I hate to have to do this, but credit to the publishers publishing this stuff as well. Is there's this opportunity now where it's like, oh, I can write this book and say this thing and say no to that note. There's actually publishers saying, okay, let's give that a shot right now. That's exciting.
Okay, well, that actually brings up a really interesting point that I want to ask both of you. Uh, EK, you are with a publishing imprint called Hell's 100, and Chuck, you are with Tor Nightfire. And both of these are imprints that are relatively young. I mean, Youthjuice is one of the first, if not the first, novel on Hell's 100, correct?
Yeah, so it's the first new release, but they did also relaunch like a classic from their
I'm
back
closer.
catalog. Come Closer by Sarah Grant. But yeah, it's kind of the new, kind of the flagship, I guess.
So as a writer, kind of coming to them with your debut novel, what is this is totally inside baseball. So and no nobody's here but us. Like nobody will know what it, so I'm just curious, like what's the conversation? Like they're like, hey, we're young, we're fresh, we're hip, like let's do this. Like what was the kind of first foray into like we want you to lead the charge?
Yeah, it was really cool because when we submitted my book, I mean, as far as I know, we did not know, like, I don't think my agent knew that they were thinking about actually starting a horror imprint. So we kind of submitted it to like Soho Crime, Soho Press, and there wasn't like, when I first signed, I actually wasn't 100% sure if the imprint was like definitely happening, but I just knew that they were like so excited about my book, and the energy was so, my editor is incredible, who's probably maybe here, and I'm not just saying that because they're here, but I feel like I just felt so like understood, and actually kind of pushed to get even wilder and weirder in like the best way. So
Oh,
I think
wow.
that was so refreshing and cool, because I was just, I know that that's not everyone's experience necessarily. And so I felt like the book got so much stronger because of my involvement with them. And it's been a really cool experience because they're in kind of an indie, but they have a lot of, great connections and stuff. So I feel like there was so much creativity in the process of publishing this book, just from like the design and there's a lot of like willingness to just try stuff, which I really appreciated.
Yeah. Chuck, with Nightfire, I mean, I mean, they're maybe 2, 3 years, maybe not even 3 years. It's been
Very young, very
very,
young.
very young.
Yes.
Um, when they came to you, like who came to who for Camp Damascus? Like, what was the kind of intro
Well,
to
I have a
Core Nightfire?
very unique, I approach a lot of things in a unique way, as I have been talking about. I have never queried or done any of that. I wrote Camp Damascus, and then I went on Twitter and said, I have a horror novel. Would anyone like to publish it? And looks like Tor Nightfire said, "Oh, we would love to see your novel." And then I
Oh
sent it, and I
man.
went with them. And then
I,
they said, "Do you have an agent?" And I said, what is that?" And then I got my agent. So it is definitely an untraditional path, kind of like I was saying, but it kind of goes with the ethos that I generally have. And my biggest advice to kind of like writers trying to get into the game is there's this sort of mentality, whether it's a big five publisher, whether it's a record label, whether it's a film studio, like if I could only get in there, if I could get that lotto ticket, and you see kind of artists begging for this like them to be plucked out of it and selected. And I think that's not a great mentality, because then you're not going to enter a contract that you would really want to be in. I think I would suggest going to it as a sort of equal. Walk into that meeting saying, I have something incredible. I have this incredible book. I have this creation that only I could make out of the, 8 billion people on the planet. Let's make a deal where we are both happy. I'm not begging you. I'm coming to you with this opportunity to join me on this journey. So I kind of entered it like that, and it worked out in that, they kind of let me do what I want to do.
Mhm.
And I was also able to kind of select the publisher based on like the vibes, how much I like the people working there. Like everyone at Nightfire is just incredible, and that
They
they
got
would
great
just let me,
vibes. They
they're
got great vibes.
amazing, and they would let me do whatever I wanted to do. My contract is very specific about, I can still write as much erotica as I want and all this stuff. And I did 2 books. I just signed for 4 more with Nightfire because I love them so much. So really, it has been a sort of, I guess I feel like the mentality of, if we're going to sign a contract with Chuck Tingle, why would you edit these books or the covers or scrub them down to where they're not a Chuck Tingle book? So I am kind of just allowed to express myself, but I feel like it's because initially I just came in saying, I have this incredible book. Who's lucky enough to publish it? And then it kind of went from there.
Oh God. I'm suddenly kind of selfishly imagining what would happen if I did that? Like what it would be like if I was just like, I'm gonna go in and I'm gonna carry that vibe. And this is a one of a kind, this is a singular thing. That's a scary prospect. Like it's honestly, there's like I feel the kind of like the anxiousness, the anxiety of like, oh my God, like am I that thing that you're speaking specifically about? And it's how do the Buckaroos take that kind of vibe and go with it? Like I feel like
Well,
there's
I
a certain kind
promise
of
that you are. You are that thing. It's not even a question. I have been accused of having blinding, belligerent confidence and guilty as charged. Uh, I I truly believe that about my work. I think, I say I am the world's greatest author, but what most Buckaroos don't realize about that is that we are all the world's greatest author. Everyone of the three of us on this chat, we are all we are all the world's greatest author. Everyone watching is too. There's plenty of room at the top. It is not a one person stand at the Olympics. It is a giant plateau. And you realize that when you realize that the entire universe, everything that has happened, rocks colliding into one another since the beginning of time, has all happened in a particular way. Every choice in our life, since we were a little dang baby, to create a perfectly unique perspective. There is no one in existence before or after that will ever be us, that will be anything like us, really, in the grand scheme of things. And that is so powerful. Harnessing that power, having confidence in that power, I think can yield truly incredible results. And sometimes, you'll feel that and you'll go into a meeting and they'll say, we don't agree. And then you just say, well, I do agree. And you move on to the next one. I think in my particular case, I had self-published for so long that I had a fan base and I just, I have this very large social media presence. So the short version of that story is just that I tweeted it. But you could also say, well, but you also wrote 8 years of erotica shorts and cultivated a huge social media following. But the end result is the same, and that I could go into these meetings and say, even without going to any other publisher, because I loved Nightfire, I wanted to go with them. I could just say to myself, well, okay, let's negotiate this contract. Here's how much I would make if I self-publish this book. I could almost have a negotiation. They always talk about things like bidding wars. You want to get all the different studios or the different publishers all. That's kind of the goal for writers. And I could kind of have a bidding war with myself and just say, listen, I want to work with you. Here's how much this will make if I self-publish. Let's do business together. So that's very empowering if you can kind of build something up yourself and kind of come at it from the side instead of struggling to climb this ladder.
Yeah. I think it's a really great way of looking at it. I mean, to be honest, like there are days where I wake up and I just like, oh my God, like how am I gonna do today? But I feel like the kind of reconfiguration of your kind of attitude towards it and your kind of mindset, like it does. Yeah, I mean, we're here to tell stories. And I think that's, I don't know, like I think I'm gonna I'm gonna try it. I'm gonna try it, Chuck. Like I wanna wake
How
up tomorrow.
wonderful.
I
I,
wanna I
I
want
talk
to.
about I talk about the power of love a lot in my writing, in my social media posts, and I mean every word of it. It's written on my dang forehead. But almost equally powerful is the power of gratitude. And I think once you kind of realize that, like, whatever you've created, we are in this kind of subjective field of art, and that art itself is just an honest message. There is no perfect book. The perfect book that you have written is one that most honestly captures yourself at that moment, whether that means it's got spelling errors, whether that means the first or third or second act doesn't, quote, work. That is no better or worse or more valid art than any other, quote, perfect piece. And I think once you can truly not just feel that, but like intellectually realize that is the essence of art, it's very empowering, because every 1 star, if I get a 1 star review on something, I can look at that and it doesn't bother me because I think, well, they're wrong. But I also can look at that and think, I'm wrong with my 5 star feelings about it. We are both wrong and we are both right. It is entirely subjective, and it is entirely, what are you going to bring to it? How are you going to feel about it?
Yeah. Guys, I have been asking EK to do me a favor, and she has agreed. There's something so transfixing about Youthjuice, that there's a certain thread, a certain narrative thread in the novel uh, that we'll just kind of call the intern thread. And I loved it so much that I begged EK to read just a little tiny, tiny bit from the book, because I remember reading it and just having this like reflex moment, thinking back to the Virgin suicides. Like there was something kind of like oddly Jeffrey Eugenides, like that vibe of like we're speaking of a body that is not just one body, but a group of bodies. And like they speak not just for one singular person, but for a group, like a larger uh, uh collective. And I don't know, like I loved it. And so I want to ask you, EK, would you please read just a little taste from Youthjuice, from the interns, please?
Yes, first of all, you're gonna make me cry with the Virgin Suicides comparison. If anyone knows me, they know that that's one of my favorites. So,
It's a beautiful book.
but yeah, so this is the very beginning of chapter 3. So I'm just gonna read like a page and a half. The interns are due fresh. The interns are blonde, brunette, redheaded. They have waves, bobs, ringlets, glossy lips and eyelids, dresses with side cutouts and patterns of flowers, of fruit, of space. They are turning their faces to the sun. They are scaling back into the shadows, afraid of damage. The interns are wearing hats. The interns have French saloon art and velvet fainting couches in their 1 bedrooms. The interns live next to the Brooklyn Bridge in the East and West Villages on the Upper East Side. The interns wear matching lingerie and vintage door knocker earrings, tiny cardigans with nothing underneath, unbuttoned to the pastry swell of their small breasts. How do their nipples not chafe? The interns carry our lavender satin drawstring pouches with phone, keys, and matte lip stain inside. Matchbooks from Balthazar or Jimmy at the James, receipts from Dimes, no wallet, not even ID. If they are killed, if their bodies are found, they will be Jane Doe. They don't care. They're dancing in backless dresses. They don't care. They have nail art. They don't care. They have a new ribcage tattoo. Do you want to see? The interns didn't read that, but they posted the books, so you know they would read them if they had the time. There is never enough time. The interns love the artist, want to be the muse. They say, draw me. They say, paint me. They say, sing me. The interns have symmetrical faces. The interns carry our lip balm, a status symbol, candy-colored tubes jutting from pockets and rolled shirt sleeves like packs of cigarettes. The interns wink and say, got a light? Smoking isn't cool anymore. Moisturizing is. Health is the new smoking. The interns understand this, and they keep their vices locked tight. They drink green juice and eat kale salad for lunch. They reach for ephemeral ethical consumption. with reusable grocery bags and recycled bamboo sundresses that disintegrate in the wash. And our products, gilding their cheekbones, kissing their lips, telling them they are perfect and holy and worthy. They are beautiful, luminous, and we make them more so. The interns, they want and want and want. We give them what we can.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That is so selfish. It was just for me. It was just for me. Like I just needed that. I needed it and you gratified. Thank you so much. It's so tragic. These interns, these poor, poor interns. I think of I live here in New York. I take the subway. I see them. They're out there in the wild, and now I have this kind of new profound sympathy for them. Like they're like, oh, they're off they go. You know, like maybe they'll come back. Maybe they won't. We never know. But we have Youthjuice to kind of say, remember the interns. Love it. Love it. Thank you, EK.
Thank you for requesting it. That's always a fun part to read.
Perfect. Chuck, I wanted to ask you, and this is like you can say no, but I have Bury Your Gaze here. And there's this one section that I would love to maybe just read like a little tiny bit from.
Sure, yes,
Yeah.
yes. I'm
Okay.
curious what you have selected. This is so interesting. I
I'm
will
gonna
say fascinating because EK's selection had the phrase "got a light," which is a big phrase in Bury Your Gaze.
gosh, the smoker lives on. The smoker is hopping from book to book to book.
There you go. Gosh, if we had another hour, we could dive into the what does smoking symbolize for our generation of authors.
God, has anyone done a story about a character in a book or a story, a fictional character hopping from one book, like they live only in books? I'm gonna hold that. So that's mine. Dibs.
Yes.
So I'm and Chuck, I'm gonna probably hop a lot, but there's like
Oh,
a
sure.
through line that I just want to capture. And I know we're kind of closing in
Oh,
on the end
yes.
of the hour, so forgive me. But first of all, horror isn't a celebration of death, I state. If horror was a celebration of death, then nobody would like it. Human beings are conditioned to move towards some behaviors and away from others. We're programmed to self-replicate and protect our legacy, which is why sex is crafted to be just about the best feeling there is. And at the same time, we're programmed to push death and pain away as much as possible. It's visceral, right? We retract our hand from a burning stove. That's obvious. But we also have a deep primal fear of the things that remind us of dying. Creepy crawlers like snakes and spiders were serious threats to our ancestors. Zombies and ghosts are reminders that one day our time will come. Killer robots or hyper intelligent space aliens pose existential threats to the survival of our species. And that the same goes for fear, though. You don't want to feel that way all the time, but it's a muscle that needs to be exercised. There are scary things in the world. That's just a fact. And if you pretend that they're not all around us, then you are in for a rude awakening. Horror offers us a chance to recognize the truth, to explore dark places in a safe way. And that is why horror is a celebration of life. And I leapt page to page to page. So forgive me for
I
compressing.
will say, as the writer understanding the jumps you're making, that was a truly incredible collage that actually worked very well. That was incredible. That was like you really did something wonderful there. That was amazing.
Well, thank you for humoring me. But
Yes.
I mean I when I was reading this to myself, I just had this moment where I was saying like it's so interesting that Chuck is writing horror. And I feel as if I've barely even dipped a toe into your erotica, but like with Camp Damascus and Bury Your Gaze, we're entering a new era of Tingle. And I guess my question, and it's such a, this kind of like competes with, you know, where do you get your ideas? So forgive me, but I'm genuinely curious, like, why horror? Why horror for you?
I think I have always loved horror. I think I do talk about sometimes, erotica and horror, not a huge jump. I talk sometimes about the trinity of maligned genres, which are I think comedy, romance, and erotica. You can kind of put those together, and horror, and that those are genres that are kind of seen by the establishment or the intelligentsia, whatever you want to call it, those who are deciding best picture, let's say, as lesser genres. If you look at the way that if you tell someone you read romance, the scoffs that you will get, comedies are treated the same way, horror is treated the same way, and I believe that that is because they are genres of the body. They are a primal genre that, as a sort of side quest along with our story beats, we are also trying to elicit a bodily reaction. With horror, it's fear or a scream. With comedy, it's laughter. With erotica, it's arousal. And that if you kind of look throughout history, there's a lot of powers that be that do not want us in touch with our body, and that like real art, valid art, true art is art of the mind, that we should shun the body. I have always found that absurd. I really artistically am interested in just like separating the divide of high and low brow. And I think that because I'm so interested in erotica and sometimes comedy, a lot of Buckaroos find my tinglers funny as well, that jumping to horror is actually kind of a simple step, because you are still playing in those taboos. You're still kind of searching for something primal, and to say, no, the body is just as valid, even if you want to say that it's not. Our bodies are valid. It's a sacred place, and it's very ripe for artistic exploration. So I have always loved horror, I think, for that reason. And I find our bodies to be a example of joy. The fact that we exist with our senses going through this timeline is proof of love. Creation is proof of love. Speaking of, we could do another 2 hours on that. But I think coming from that place, it makes sense to explore that. And if you want to prove love is real, and shine the light of radiant love and joy, what better place than in darkness? I mean, that's where it's going to be the most effective, right?
I love it. I love it. And I think that's where we got to end it. Like there's no getting beyond that. Like that's the moment. I cannot thank you two enough for sharing this time with me. Your books are amazing. Like I love both of these books, both of these novels. You have to get them. Youthjuice by E.K. Sathue. It's on Hell's 100. It is out there on shelves right now. Bury Your Gaze by Chuck Tingle and Tor Nightfire. It is on shelves as we speak. These are two beautiful authors with two beautiful books, but that beauty is only skin deep, and what's underneath it is. I thank you guys. Like really, I really appreciate it. Chuck, EK, you're the best.
Thank you
Um,
so much.
yeah, that was
Yeah, thank you. This was so lovely.
kind of want another hour. I swear to God, like I have a few other questions. I'll just bug you guys on Twitter or something. I'll just give them like, like, hey, okay, what's Gwyneth Paltrow think of Youth Juice? Um, everybody, thanks for tuning in. This has been Fearmonger. My name is Clay McLeod Chapman. I am your host, and yeah, we'll see you guys in September. Bye.